Alright, so you want to learn how to blacksmith, but you have no clue what you're doing. You don't know what you need or anything of that matter, but you want to learn. I'm going to compile a quick video on everything you're going to need to start out the basics, pretty much what you can do from scrap and what you can find to use, and just the most basic tools to start blacksmithing and to start your new hobby. Um, so I'm going to go over what blacksmithing is, what a forge is, and the tools that you're going to need. And we're going to go through, I have a bunch of videos that I'm going to include in a link. And we are going to go through everything from the basics to how to make something small and something simple and basic, and some of the tools you can make and some of the tools you can use and some of the tools you can find. So let's get started. The first question is, what is forging? What is a forge? What is the act of forging? And the answer to that is the bending and the manipulation of metals using a hammer and an anvil to create tools or weapons or horseshoes or whatever you want. Whatever you want to make out of metal. That can be steel or copper or silver or brass or any kind of metal. To take a hammer to an anvil, and to manipulate it is to forge. So another question, or the next question would be, what is smelting, or what is the difference between the two? So smelting and casting, pardon me, smelting and casting are the act of melting a metal to then create a shape. Through casting it would be to pour it into a mold that creates the shape that you're after, whereas forging is to bend it into that shape. So a metal casting would be, for example, bullet shells. Bullet shells are casted metal, whereas a hammer would be a forged piece of metal, where it is one chunk of steel that is turned into something through. They use automatic forges, but for what we're doing, you would hit it into the shape, and a casting is just to melt up a chunk of, we would use copper or brass or something that has a lower melting point, that is easier to use than steel, which has a higher melting point and you can't really do in your backyard, but you would melt it down in a crucible and pour it onto your shape. Now to make a forge or a smelter is pretty much the same thing. What it requires is heat. Heat up using fuel, air, and heat, right? Fuel, air, and heat. Yes, those three things. So fuel, we use coal, we use charcoal. You can use wood or briquettes, or coal coke is another thing. I've never used coal coke. It is pretty much purified coal, but I don't have it here. We don't have access to it. So coal and charcoal are the main two that we use. You can use wood, but it's not quite as efficient. It doesn't burn quite as hot or as well, and you burn through a lot of it. The difference between coal and charcoal, the real difference is coal is found in the ground. It's a mineral that is used to be burnt, but it's quite gnarly to burn. You know, when you throw it in the forge, you can see all these different kinds of colors coming out of it, and it stinks and it makes your face all black. Whereas charcoal is just wood that has been contained while burnt, so it burns off all the gases, but it doesn't actually burn the wood. There's no air in the container, so it just makes this hard, pretty much pure carbon material. I like to use it because it burns. It's cheaper. It burns just as well as coal, and it doesn't stink, because coal is stinky and it's kind of gross, and yeah. So the next question is, how does the forge work? So we know that it needs air and fuel and heat. To combine those, we need to have air going in at a high rate into the fire, which makes the gas or the fuel burn faster and harder. As we know, in a car, you need gas and you need air. A car needs air to burn. And for example, a turbocharger just gives it more air to make it burn faster and hotter, and makes your car go faster. That's totally something different, but it gives it more air, which makes it more powerful. So with a forge, we are giving the fire more air to make it hotter and more powerful, because a regular fire, although it could heat up steel, cannot do it well. You know, you got to wait a long time, and you can do it with just the fireplace, but it takes a long time and it's not very efficient. Whereas a forge heats it up right quick. You can get it up to the point where you can melt steel. I've accidentally melted iron and steel in my backyard. I wasn't watching my piece and it just melted and my project was gone. And I'm using something that I spent $13 on. I bought a hairdryer and that was it. The rest of the tools I found at the dump, so hopefully you guys can do the same thing. So how a forge works is that you add air to fuel at a high rate, and it makes it hotter and makes a better fire. So how it's made, I have a few parts here. I don't have a full forge set up because it's snowy outside and I don't want to go out there. But I have a few parts here and I can show you how the forge works, sort of, and a general idea of how I built mine and how easy it is to build a forge in your backyard. Alright, so these are the main two pieces of my forge, excluding the blower, because I don't have that here, that's at a friend's house, but this is what you really need to start forging. I have here, this is a disc brake off of a car, and actually I think it's a truck, it's kind of large, and this is a air vent that I found at the dump. Both of these I found at the dump, and I don't know how this hasn't melted yet. You can see it on here, there's clinkers of melted metal and all different kinds of melted stuff. I don't know if you can see that, but it hasn't melted. Anyway, so this prevents any ash or large chunks of steel or coal or whatever it is you're burning from falling into a blower. So you have this set on top of an air source, a tube, and on top of this you have your disc brake. So it sits like this. You could use for instead of a air vent, you could use any kind of mesh or screen that's just pretty much preventing anything from falling down where you don't want stuff to fall down. And in here I'm going to fill it up with coal or charcoal, sorry. And this is where my fire is going to be. This is relatively small, but for a backyard, that's all I need. It's quick and it's easy, and I got this stuff for free. I mean, evidently it's junk, but it works. So to get this to burn, once you have your coal and charcoal in it, you then have to have a tube. And I use a hairdryer attached to a bunch of old tent pegs that are like from the military tent. They're like that big around, and they're in an L shape. So I have a blower on one end, and then the L shape goes up and underneath into here. So it comes up sideways and in. And that is where I get my air from, which creates a wicked hot fire. As I said, I have bits and chunks of metal in here that are melted right in half from me trying to make a knife, and I forget about it. I go and take a drink or something, come back, and my project is on, you know, it's flaming and there's shit sparking out. And but that just goes to show how efficient you can make something in your backyard and how hot you can get it with literally, I think it was $13 for the hairdryer. And again, I don't have it here, but I can draw something out and I can show you. Or I have videos of how to make a forge, and I'm going to include that in the link here. And you can see just how easy it is and how little materials you need. So yeah, that's all you need for a forge. The first tool you are going to need, in my opinion the most important one, is a flat surface that you can use as an anvil. I have another chunk of this here. This is rail track that has been cut. I found this one at a yard sale for 50 cents, and I found this one at the tracks that probably shouldn't have taken, but it did anyway. And this is pretty much the easiest, fastest solution for trying to find an anvil. You can try and find them again at yard sales or different places. You can buy them at Princess Auto for 50 bucks for a small anvil, and they work good. But if you want to try and do this as cheap and as cheap as possible, this is probably the best option. I've used this for a year and a half now, and it works well. I mean, it gets a little bit dinged up, but Any anvil is going to do that. You have to make sure you have a straight edge and kind of a rounded edge. All different kinds of tools and materials take different edges and different tools to shape them to what you need. So this is pretty much the best option. If you have a small piece like this, you can also flip it and you have an even flatter side. A vice grip is also really good. A really good tool. You can set this in a vice grip, and then you have an anvil there. And vice grips are useful for pretty much anything, being that for some materials you have to twist them for a cool handle, and a vice grip you can just close it and twist it. And I will include another video on twisting different handles to make really neat things, and you can use it for bending. But that is the most important tool, in my opinion, is the anvil, and this is the cheapest one you can get, and by far the best for the price. Okay. Anyway, that's the anvil. The most important tool is a hammer. This is a sledgehammer that I bought at the store and cut the handle off so I could use it with just one hand. It's 8 pounds, and I use this to manipulate, you know, heavier steels, or if I'm trying to draw something out that's kind of giving me a little bit of trouble, I use this. It's heavy and it makes your arm hurt, but it makes you strong. It's a really good cheap option. You can buy good blacksmithing hammers online, or if you might find a little craft store that has them. But there's all different kinds of hammers you're going to need. I have one of these, which is an 8 pound. I also have a 6, 4, and a 2 pound hammer that look relatively the same. They're just smaller. You're going to need a ball peen hammer. I'm going to include some photos of these kinds of hammers. And a flat peen hammer is very useful. All different sizes and weights, and the flatness or the curvature of the surface here. The hitting surface is all dependent on what you're trying to do. A ball peen is very useful for trying to make rivets, or if you're trying to round something and you don't have a rounding dish. Also for making blood grooves and all different a ball peen hammer is one of the most important ones. I don't have mine with me. Again, it's at a friend's house. A ball peen and I'm going to say a 6 or 4 pound hammer are the two most important hammers, as well as a flat peen. I didn't have a flat peen for the longest time, so you can make it do without, but it does make drawing out metal a lot easier, a lot quicker, and a lot more fun, because you're not, frustrated as to why you can't draw something out. With a flat peen, instead, you can just use the side of an anvil to draw out a piece of steel. Drawing out is essentially putting dents in it, flat dents, to kind of expand it a little bit. So you put some dents in it and then you flatten it so it makes it longer, and I'll include another video on that. So hammers are one of the most necessary parts of forging and blacksmithing. So again, I would recommend getting a 4 or 6 pound hammer and a flat peen and a ball peen. They are cheap. You can get them for probably 10 or 20 bucks at the hardware store. And this is a good one. As I said, it's heavy. I call it Thor's hammer because it's quite heavy. But all different hammers. If you find any neat looking hammers too, you can get them, or you can make your own. I have a piece of round stock here, and this is going to be used. I have it marked out. I'm going to make a few different hammers with this. So I have to cut it, and then Alex Steel, I have a link to the video here on how to make hammers. Super easy, super cool, and it's pretty fun. And to be able to use something that you created to create more things that you're going to create I find that pretty cool. I find that quite unique in that you can say I've made everything from the hammer to the final product. Next most important item, tongs or pliers. If you're cheap and you don't have access to buying tongs, and you're just starting out, a pair of pliers works great. You're able to grip on the metal. There's different sizes and whatnot for pliers. I have needle nose pliers and all different kinds of pliers that I can use for making basic tools. But once you're sick of your pliers and you want to move on to something better, you can use these guys. This is a rail spike to create tongs out of. I have a good video on here of how to make basic tongs, and these are the perfect shape and the perfect starting piece of steel, or I think some of these are iron and some of these are steel. The perfect material to start out with, because they're already in a good shape. You have to draw them out just a little bit, and they're very easy to work with. So a rail spike is the best option for making tongs when you're just starting. They're free. Can't really complain with free steel, free materials. So these are the best option if you're trying to make not only tongs but basic tools like punches and anything of that sort. You can make knives out of these, although they're not the best knife in the world. They're still cool. I know a few guys that have businesses making knives just from these, and they do actually pretty well, because there's a lot of people that think it's cool. It's a little neat business. But yeah, this is the best material for making tongs, in my opinion. And if you don't have tongs, these little guys are the best for using and manipulating metal. You know, they're easy to grip, and these are cheap. I got these at the dollar store, and they're a good set of pliers. I've had them for years. So tongs are a very important part of blacksmithing. Oh, this shit tastes like piss water. Anyway, personal protective equipment is one of the most important things when you're working with a hot fire, hot pieces of metal. There's bits of slag flying up in your face sometimes, and you know, chunks of hot things all over the place. So personal protective equipment, one of the most important things. That includes gloves. I have Anarchy welding gloves. They're cheap. I got them at Princess Auto for like 20 bucks. They're a good glove. You're able to even grab onto certain metal while you're working with it, and you don't need tongs. They are very important to wear gloves. And another thing that is important as well, if you're wearing gloves that have an open cuff, I like wearing a long sleeve shirt even though it's hot working in the forge, because there are bits of slag that can fly off material that will go into your glove and they will stick to you and they will burn you, and it's like the most disgusting smell you've ever smelt. You know, your own flesh burning. So gloves are very important, because another thing is, if you're working with metal and your hand slips, let's say you're first starting out and you're striking a piece of metal and you hit it wrong and boom, your fist hits that piece of hot metal. You don't want, you know, your whole hand burning. So gloves are very important. Another thing is goggles or glasses. I have a piece of, you know, just regular plexiglass that I cut, and I have steampunk goggles that I like to wear because they look cool. But you want to make sure you're wearing eye protection, because again, things can fly up in your face. You don't want a hot piece of metal going into your eye. You're never going to be able to see again. As well as eye protection, you need ear protection, because hitting an anvil is loud and working with metal is loud. You don't want to wreck your ears, so either those little earbud things, those little foam guys, or I have a full headset I like to wear. I mean, it gets annoying and it gets hot, especially when you're working with a hot fire, but it's a lot better than not being able to hear 10 years down the road. Another important piece of protection that I like to wear, I made an apron out of a sheet of leather. It is just a cutout of leather that goes over my chest, and that's to protect both my clothing and, you know, my chest and my legs, because sometimes when you're working in the forge, you know, a piece of metal again is going to fly and it's going to hit you in the crotchal area, and you don't want your crotchal area burnt, because that would suck. You know, I've seen some pairs of pants where the whole, you can see the guy's his pockets, because everything's been burnt for, you know, that whole area. So I like to wear an apron, because leather doesn't really want to burn as bad as anything else. Like, you can use rawhide mallets on steel that I've seen guys use, and it won't burn through it. So an apron is not necessary, but I enjoy using one because I don't want to get myself burnt. So those are the four most important personal protection items. I mean, there's a few others. Steel-toe boots are a good idea. You never want to wear flip-flops. I knew a guy who wore flip-flops at my forge, and he got burned pretty bad with bits of slag. I don't know, it was pretty dumb. I shouldn't have even let him, you know, hang out there. But good shoes, pants. I like a long sleeve shirt. You don't have to. Anything to kind of protect you from getting burnt. Another thing to take note is there are some materials that if they come in contact with, you know, a piece of hot metal and they're going to catch on fire, they might actually catch on fire. So make sure that your clothing is somewhat fireproof. It's not, you know, a giant thing of straight cotton that, you know, is perfect tinder, because that would suck. So personal protection is the way to go. Materials. These are the three materials I have right now. I have a few other bits and pieces of crap metal, but I mean, this is the main kind of stuff you're going to find if you're scavenging around the tracks or around a rail yard. Don't steal, but if there's something laying there, like, I'll take it. if it's rusty and laying out in the ground. I mean, I don't want to be a thief or anything, but I found this. This was a giant, it was a bolt. To about here it was threaded. And I took my big old 8-pound hammer and drew this out as, I couldn't even say that, drew this out as much as I could. And eventually I brought it out to about here, and I made a knife out of it. So drawing out is taking a piece of metal, this can be round or square stock, and lengthening it and eventually creating something. I mean, this is quite juvenile, but it was my first project, and I think it looks pretty cool for being the first knife that I ever made, but it's not bad. This here is a chunk of iron that I found in the shop at work. It is from a door, like a door that you pull and it opens something, and then when you let go it closes it for you. It's just a chunk of, I don't know if it's iron or steel or what it is, but I'm going to try and make a hammer out of this, or 2 hammers out of this, and honestly, just the best thing to do is find bits of scrap metal and work with them, and if they work, they work, if they don't, they don't. Again, these are great. I have buckets full of these. You can make knives and punches and tongs and any kind of little tool out of them. On the back here, a lot of them have different letters and numbers and such. When you're looking to make tools of any sort, you want to try and find the ones that say HC on them. This one says HH. I don't know what that stands for, but the ones that say HC mean high carbon, and so far as I've read, they're the best ones you want to use. They're more steel-like instead of iron. So high carbon is the way to go if you find rail spikes and any kind of scrap metal. I mean, if you're just hanging out one day and you want to try and you find some chunk of metal, throw it in the forge, see what happens. As long as it's not titanium or something crazy, give it a whirl. Try and, you know, in your first few weeks, just try and forge random stuff. Just try and make things and try and manipulate it the way you want it to go, and you'll learn just from doing that. There's so many different things you can do with forging. I love it. It's great. To look for if you're going to be forging swords or knives or whatever. There's a few different parts of swords that if you buy them in the store, they're not as high quality as you might think. For example, this is a blade from the sword Frostmourne, which is a World of Warcraft sword. And when you first buy it, all of this is covered up, and it's like, oh, this is such a cool sword, it's such a big sword, and people want to go out and swing it. Now with these and katanas that you can buy in a store, and all different kinds of knives and swords, this is what you call a rat tail tang. So they have made the blade, and instead of bringing the handle out of steel, they have tack welded a little iron rod onto it. So the only thing holding it together is this little weld. It is only on one side, and it's not straight, and it's not the best weld in the world. As opposed to a full tang sword, which I will show you here, the actual handle is drawn out in steel. So I'm not going to take this off because it's a pain to put back on, but throughout here is all steel, and it's not welded together. It's not just going to break when you go, and I mean there's videos of guys swinging swords around and breaking them on the internet, and they break right at the handle because it's just a little piece of tack or MIG welded steel on there. So one thing to do if you're ever blacksmithing, you ever want to make a knife or something, is make sure to go with a full tang, because it's a lot better, and it's a pain to have to try and re-weld something that is a rat tail tang, and it's not worth it. Go the extra mile, make a full tang on it, because it's just dumb to not have one, honestly. Like, I don't want to be a dick, but it's kind of it's cheap the other way and dumb, and there's no point to doing it. But that's just a small bit of sword information for you. That's kind of my goal in blacksmithing. I want to be able to create swords and other weapons. Other people may choose to go more of the making little jewelry trinkets, and you know, I know a few farriers, and that's their job. But, you know, with blacksmithing, you're able to do so many different things and go so many different routes. There's a lot of people that just make tools and just make hammers and just do it for a hobby, just to make little things, or, you know, even around the house I've made, hinges and latches and all different kinds of things, that instead of going by the store to go pick one up, you know, when you're bored one day, might as well go and make one in the backyard, which I find is pretty neat, pretty cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Hope it wasn't too boring and long. There's a few other links I'm gonna include in this video. Check them out. A lot of them are good videos. Even check out the guys' channels afterwards, like other videos. There's a lot of Alex Steele is a really good teacher and blacksmith, and I watch a lot of his videos, as well as there's a David Guetin or something. He makes armor and a lot of cool stuff, as well as stormthecastle.com. That guy makes cool stuff, and he shows you really how to do it from bare bones, from nothing. So, in conclusion, we have gone over what is blacksmithing, what is a forge, what is smelting, what is welding. We've also gone over how a forge works, the tools that you need to start forging and blacksmithing, personal protective equipment, and I delved a little bit into some sword stuff, kind of useless information, just, I don't know, I found some swords and I thought I should throw that in there, I don't know why. But if there's any other questions you have, or any inquiries, make sure to shoot me a message. I'm going to throw this on YouTube, so drop a like and subscribe to my channel. We've got MH Backwoods, where my buddy Eric and I, we just kind of go and do whatever we're doing when we film it. Now that blacksmithing season, I'm going to call it, is starting. It's nice and cool out, work's slowing down. We should see some more videos. I'm going to show you guys how to make tongs. Eventually, I want to make the hammers that I was talking about, and I'm going to throw that on the internet. A few knives, and I also have some bee stuff coming up. It's the end of the season, so I'm going to show packing and treatments. What else? Hunting season is here. I have not had time to get out because the weather is crap and I'm still working. So the geese are just starting to fly, and hopefully soon we can get some videos of that. I have some old footage. If there's nothing from this year, I will put some old footage up just for something to show. My cat's trying to escape. He's crazy. His name is Steve French. He's just a good kitty. Yeah, and if you guys ever have any requests on videos of me making anything, I definitely want to get some videos, at least of me forging, because I can talk about it all I want, but it doesn't actually show anything. Anything else you guys want, just shoot me a message, and if it's reasonable, I will try my best to make a video of it. Apart from that, again, leave a like, a comment if you want, subscribe to our channel, and have a great day, guys. Have a great week, and take her easy. Peace out.